Hi guys, it's Sophie. So I'm here to do another Around the World update, and I'm only going to be talking about four books today, but I'll show you the fifth only because I've already reviewed the fifth. So first I'll just cover off the one that I've already reviewed, and I'll link the review video to this video, and that is From a Low and Quiet Sea by Donal, and this is my pick for Ireland. Next country I have is North Korea. My pick for North Korea is one that a lot of people have read. It's The Accusation by Bandi. I read this toward the end of my Turkey holiday, and I fear that it suffered because of that. I found it, and I think this is probably intended, I found the collection to be really claustrophobic and close and oppressive, which I think is what was meant. But I actually found that depressed me rather than intriguing me, because of the fact that I was at the very end of my holiday. It was the day when I was just waiting for my plane, and it wasn't what I needed then, but it was all I had left. So I kind of feel as though my thoughts around this book aren't necessarily as positive as they would have been if I'd read it in a different setting, a different time. I did like it. I think it did what I wanted it to do in terms of opening up a little bit of a door into North Korea for me, and it's fascinating because it's stories that have all been kind of smuggled out of North Korea really by this guy called Bandi, which is a pseudonym, and he still lives in North Korea and writes these stories sort of about North Korea and the dictatorship and what it's like to live there. I did feel as though I kind of knew quite a lot of this, but I think that's mostly because I've read and watched quite a lot about North Korea before, not fairly recently actually, but sort of in the past it's really intrigued me, like the idea of this closed off kind of perfect country. But yeah, I did think it was, I did think it was interesting for learning about North Korea. I think that's probably what this is more than anything. But I didn't enjoy the reading experience, and I think that's because I read it in the way I read it. The book I have for Yemen is A Land Without Jasmine by Wajdi Al-Ahdal. And I've actually had this book for ages because I bought it when my ex-boyfriend was deployed to Yemen. This is a short little novella about a woman who is very kind of beautiful, very pure, and she's known for sort of being very religious and not being liable to being exploited or tempted by men. And she disappears, she goes missing, and there's a lot of discussion around if someone's hurt her and if so, who. It's got some kind of magical realism elements here, and it's such a cool way of looking inside this country. And this is the full version. The version that was published in Yemen has all of the sex elements taken out of it. This is the full work. It's interesting. It's kind of like, what does sexual repression do, and what is it like in a country that is really backwards in terms of its treatment of women, and how even women who are like in the archetype, like what they would want, like these chaste, beautiful young women who just want to be around God, how even they are like denigrated by this society. Yeah, if you're interested in Middle Eastern fiction, I would recommend. Next I have Iran. So for Iran I actually have two books, but I'm only going to talk about this one. So this book is essentially written by an Iranian American who was born in America, but it's set in Iran. Doris Lessing's The Fifth Child is set in the UK, but she was born in Iran. So I'm kind of saying this is the person who was born in Iran, but I think it's more interesting to talk about If You Could Be Mine by Sara, which is a YA book about LGBT rights in Iran, and I thought it was fabulous. It is a story about two girls who are in love with one another, sort of have been kind of broadly kind of forever, and one of them is engaged to be married, and it's about what happens to their relationship. It turns out that an interesting kind of quirk about Iran is that transsexuality is seen as a medical condition and is kind of more accepted but not completely accepted than being gay. So one of the girls is exploring whether or not she would change her gender to be with her partner. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, and I learned so much about that country's LGBT feeling, and how the people who live in those countries who are LGBT kind of survive and live. Yeah, it's just fabulous. There's some brilliant characters in here, and even though it's YA, it's not really like fluffy and light, and I think even if you don't normally read it, you might enjoy it. And then last I have Russia. Now if you aren't into the scribbly things, just be aware that there's a long one. I'll put the timestamp up as to when it stops, and then you can hear me talk about Russia. So the book I have for Russia is The Brothers by Masha Gessen, and this seems like a really weird one because the author is born in Russia, ticks the box, but it is a story about a bombing in America. Now the reason I ended up choosing this one, because I did have others, is because actually in reality I would say at least the first third to 2/3 is not about America at all, and this is a true crime book around the Boston bombing, if you didn't know, but really it's going back into the history of Russia and Chechnya and why Chechnyans have a sort of different experience to Russians, to other Muslims, and what that identity is and how that plays in. And I thought I learnt more about Russia in this and the way that Russia split itself up and its alliances and its political powers than I would have done from reading another book about Russia. And I think I would only be tentatively recommending this as a true crime book, because I think it doesn't hit all the things I would want from a true crime book, but as a book kind of if you're into true crime and Russia, you will enjoy this. Or if you like history or historical non-fiction but aren't into true crime, this might be a door in for you. Yeah, it's a weird one. I don't know that it would be what I would be looking for, but I did really like what it was. So yeah, that's my pick for Russia. So those were the next 5 countries on my around the world list. I've actually got 2 more that I've read already, good job me, even though I've kind of stopped doing it as a proper project. I'm still kind of twiddling along behind the scenes and reading them as we go. So yeah, I'll have another update for you guys at some stage, I don't quite know when yet, and look after yourselves until then. Bye!